Hey everyone, welcome to episode 112. I'm your host Stelios and the founder and director of Ceres Pure Food Innovation. Just a little update, as we get closer to Christmas, we've noticed an upswing in sales, but everything is taking longer to source and longer to make. We hope this should settle out, after Christmas and the January season, the start of the new year. You might notice that some of our packaging is different over the coming months. It has been increasingly difficult to source the same packaging that we've been using for years. But our main goal and dedication has actually been to keep the product inside the same. So you might notice, again, some different packaging. Don't worry, it's the same product inside. If you are concerned, just give us a shout anytime. As many of you may have noticed, we've started slotting in these ads at the beginning of the podcast. We will never insert ads in the middle to break up the conversation, so we hope that's really cool with you. The Ceres seasoned rice flour is the perfect pre-dust for frying. For years we've been making this on a small batch basis, but due to popular demand, we've now made it available to everybody. The seasoned rice flour has no artificial flavours, no artificial colourings. It's individually packed for freshness, so you've not got a whole big bag just sitting open, absorbing all the elements. And because of that, there's less wastage too. It's naturally allergen-free. And did you know that by having the seasoning in the pre-dust, it maximises the batter performance? So you can increase the life of your oil because the batter's not full of seasoning and then, breaking down your oil faster. What I love about the Ceres seasoned rice flour is that we've chosen a real tight grade of heat-treated milled rice flour with a special grade of salt. When you blend these together, you get a fully homogenized product that really boosts your consistency, and that's what we're in the business for. So, get your seasoned rice flour today at worldofceres.com. Today's episode is with Lee Sheldon. Lee is the co-founder of MMU, Mastering Multi-Units, a development consultancy focused on enhancing the capabilities of operators, that's you, especially multi-unit managers, to achieve sustained operational excellence. In the past, Lee was the Global Director of Learning and Development for SSP Group for 8 years. SSP operates retail, food and beverage units in travel locations, delivering both own brands and world famous third-party brands such as Starbucks, Burger King and M&S Simply Food. Prior to his role in SSP, Lee spent 6 years in L&D for Blockbuster Entertainment. Before that, Lee spent 10 years in operations, in-store and regional management roles. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode with Lee. Lee, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
I'm pleased to be here, sir. How are you, Stelios?
Yeah, not too bad. Lee, tell our listeners what it is that you do and, what is a typical day like?
I'm not sure. Does anyone ever say there is a typical day? So
there was.
There was, yes, that's probably true. It all changed 18 months ago. So MMU, Mastering Multi-Units, we created that business about 8 years ago. But I need to really take you back a bit further. Many, many years ago when I first became an area manager, district manager. We like the term multi-site manager, multi-unit manager. And my induction for that job was pretty much, here's your keys for the car, here's your laptop, and here's your list of stores. I think the mobile phones were around then, I can't remember. And that was it. That was kind of your induction and your ramp to success. And I thought, doesn't seem to be very helpful or supportive. There must be a better way of doing this. Maybe I've just been unlucky. And then I, quite honestly quickly discovered that's often the norm when people get promoted from single site. I think I was a good single site manager. That's probably one of the reasons I was promoted at the time. But promoted into multi-site without any really understanding of how is the role different. What's similar, but what are the differences? What skill sets might you need to embrace and let go of?
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be, and I think there's a gap in the market for a training and development company that focuses on operations, particularly the multi-site leadership role that I've referred to, particularly in retail and hospitality, to be fair. And one day, I'm going to do that. So it took a few years, but eventually in 2013 we formed MMU, and we focus on developing those multi-site managers who are currently in role. The next generation, so how do you help those really talented store or restaurant GMs who are seeking to advance their career? Maybe there isn't a job available tomorrow, but we want to kind of get them ready over a 9-12 month period for opportunities. And the other aspects I think as we've developed as a business has been the more general remote management, because guess what, multi-site management is remote management. And of course, for some reason, we've all been doing a lot of that in the last 18 months. So understanding that those principles, arguably the principles of leadership, don't change. The processes and tactics you might use might have changed because people are working more remotely, but principles of being a good manager haven't changed.
Yeah.
And time management and productivity, that's probably the third element, something we're very passionate about. And we're kind of mission, if you like, is I do believe everyone deserves to have an outstanding manager. And the multi-site manager, I think, is often the key enabler. Sometimes they can be the key blocker too.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is help those people be successful in that role.
Well, I guess most people, like you said, even today, if you fast forward all those years, most people aren't going into this thinking, I'm going to be running 10 Gregs, 13 Gregs, or whatever, or, I'm the boss of, not boss, but general manager of 40 Subways. Nobody goes into that mindset, do they? So what sort of key skills are you looking for in a person to manage that sort of business?
Well, firstly, it's true to say that a lot of the performance metrics that a store general manager is going to be responsible for are similar. So profit is, do you have to worry about that as an area manager? Of course you do. You have to worry about labour. So a lot of the metrics, there's a lot of crossover in terms of the results, but you're now just not focused on one site, as you say. You're now looking at 10, 15, 20, maybe more. I have a friend of mine, Professor Chris Muller, who was at Boston University. He's one of the leading experts, academics on multi-site leadership, certainly in the US. He often talks about the area manager needs to be almost the director of finance for his area, the director of marketing for her area, the director of IT, etc. So you really need to take on more responsibility for understanding your finance, marketing, and human resources. They're three big areas, and I think technology, and in the sense of what tools you've got to use to enable you to manage your operation, your people, your finance. It's not about becoming a tech person, but understanding what tools you've got. Technology is clearly enabling us to be, in theory, more productive than ever before. You need to be on that technology curve. You need to be looking and understanding what's available in a way that you didn't before. So running a good restaurant is a key thing, but just because you've run a good restaurant doesn't mean you will be successful. I think some of the things, the potential, if you like, that you need to look for if you think who is the next generation, they should be someone who's knocking on your door now, wanting to learn more, to take on more responsibility, to be stretched in their role. And when you give them those opportunities, what absolutely mustn't happen is their existing store or restaurant shouldn't fall apart the moment they step away to help you with a project. So if they get involved with other things, and their restaurant carries on running, almost like clockwork, that's, I think, a good sign that they've got a team behind them, that they don't have to be there day in, day out, because the very nature of multi-site managers, you're not in the restaurant every day, let alone every week. So you've got to be able to manage and make a difference from a distance, which I think that good sign of it, a good flag to watch out for, is when the store or restaurant manager comes out and the restaurant doesn't fall apart around their ears because they've left it, because it's not all about them. They've developed a team around them to do it. So I definitely look out for that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, again, a lot of people probably wouldn't have thought of that. They'd probably give them a bit of slack and say, well, it's okay that the business is, took a little bit of a dive because he's not there as much, but he's doing something else more important, or she. So
yeah, I think, I'm not saying there wouldn't be any impact, but I think there's a difference between, or maybe we were 1% down where we might have been, then it's 6% down. Complaints have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
The wastage.
That tells you something's not as good as... Yeah.
Exactly. How long you're away from it and it maintains a good level of performance is a good indicator.
I guess another key indicator is if that one person isn't replaceable, that is also a bit of an issue, because you don't want any member of staff to be irreplaceable, because that puts the business in a very tricky situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, again, Chris Muller introduced me to a concept. I think Jim Sullivan talks about this. Darden Restaurants, I think, pioneered it, the rule of 7. And the idea being that, let's say, you're in the top of that pyramid, you would ideally want to have 2 people underneath you who over time could be developed into your role. Now, one might person within 9 months, person B could be 12 to 18 months, but identify 2 people. But then the key is underneath them to identify 2 people who could replace each role, which is where you get the 7 from. Now, sometimes it's a rule of 4 or a rule of 9 because you've got more or less people. But the concept really, and I think outstanding multi-site managers always do this, is not just think about who could replace me, who could replace them. And even, dare I say, go down to, well, which supervisors could become assistant managers, because the assistant manager becomes the new general manager, because the new general manager becomes the new multi-unit manager. So you're working several layers down, and you're thinking actively, what could I do with that person in the next 30 days? What do I want John to be able to do in 30 days' time that he doesn't know how to do today? Or what do I want him to be better at in 30 days' time? Identify that, then what are the steps that we could practically take to make that happen, make that reality? Because too often people write vague gibberish down on performance goals. You know, John needs to be a better coach, or John needs to be a better manager. What a load of drivel. What does that really mean? And then they're surprised when they come around probably once or twice a year and they only appraise it and go, oh, we didn't do anything with that. Well, that's because it was vague. There was no specific steps that were going to be taken. There's no measures. How do you measure, is someone a better manager? You can measure these things, but you've got to think about them. And breaking it down to that more bite size, what can I do with John over the next 30 days, those little incremental gains, that's one thing you can do to make sure you're gradually improving people so that they can, 6 months' time, become an assistant manager, or in a year's time, become a general manager. Little and often, rather than one big intervention that, quite frankly, probably will never happen, or even it does, we send them on a course for 3 days. How long is that sustainable for?
Again. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, sending people on a course for 3 days these days is challenging. I just mean, in pandemic times, just I think people being out of a restaurant or a retail environment for 2 or 3 days at a time is a challenge in terms of cover and all that.
So it's interesting because as you say this, and it alludes to our conversation before, is that the word manager or leader has a lot of fanfare around it. Where actually, the way you describe this is that could be any of those people in that scenario, you know, in that hierarchy. Is they're leading someone or managing someone to take over their job because they want to take over the job above them, not in a nasty way, just everyone wants to move up, which is great for the business. And actually it's those little small touches constantly, as opposed to, all right, we're sending you on a course, be grateful, and then they come back and they resent the fact that they went on a course, so they came back to teach them something new anyway. Yeah. Whereas this is like, no, we'll do it every day. Like every day, lots of gentle little touches. I mean, this may seem very strange coming out of my lips, but if you just run a course, you're wasting your time. Yeah.
I think there's got to be, I mean, the old phrase blended learning is absolutely sort of valid, and there's sort of even more modern, up-to-date buzz phrases for it. But essentially, most of what we do at MMU, there might be some work session element, but then there's got to be a follow-up. We like to call it observation rather than observation. When we're in the operation, watching that, for example, multi-site manager visiting their restaurant, conducting a business review with their general manager of that restaurant. We've talked about the theory, we've talked about what a good business review looked like, what KPIs, what areas of the business they want to be focusing on. We've done all of that perhaps in a one-to-one or small group session, but then we've got to actually watch them do it for real, not a role play, but for real, getting feedback, then watching them again a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two later. Have they taken that feedback on board? What's got better? Fantastic. Let's give them encouragement to keep on getting better. What additional suggestions have we got? So it's often a journey. Most of the engagements we tend to do at MMU are probably 6 to 9 months average project, because this isn't about a 1-2 day course. And if it is, you're kind of wasting your time.
How can you change someone's complete outlook in 1 or 2 days? Well, maybe you can like spike their interest and motivate them, which is great. Obviously, you need motivation, but that's not going to get you through the long term, is it?
It's not. And if I'll be pedantic for a second, in one respect, you can't change their outlook.
No,
but what you can do is inspire them. Yeah. Absolutely. So you can. Franklin Covey, which is a company we work with, they have a great model, See, Do, Get, and basically. Most training focuses on what do you need to do differently, Stelios? What tasks do you need to do? How do you need to do it? And these are the results you're going to get. What it forgets is, why did you want to do it differently? Yeah. Why should you want to embrace something you've never done before? Because it'll be difficult to do it for the first time. It will be like, oh, this is hard and I want to do this. You've got to have a mindset to want to do it. So it's Jim Sullivan uses that phrase, teach, know, why. before know-how, and I think that's absolutely applicable. Help people to see the benefit of being different, or why they should need to be different, because then they can make a judgment call about, well, am I going to do this because I have to, which is compliance, or actually I really want to do this, which is commitment. And I think great managers decide, do I want to create a culture of compliance, where it's quite frankly all about fear and getting told off, or a culture of commitment, well, I want to do it. I'll be honest, if you create a culture of commitment, you get compliance anyway because I want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. How long do you think, like the hospitality industry, especially now, is cutthroat for staff, for employees? They've got abundance of choice. So if they can work anywhere for the same rate, they're going to go where they can be happy and learn and have opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I've always said, when you're employing somebody, you should assume that everyone is a volunteer, because the fact they get paid means that doesn't mean anything, is what I wanted to say, is actually that everyone's going to get paid. So you have to assume that everyone's a volunteer. So now, how can I get the best staff, or best employees, whatever you want to call it, and I think, so these leadership skills, I don't know, I just feel like, or operational skills, whatever they are, it just sounds like appealing to me a bit more, rather than, putting someone in there and saying, right, here's how you make the sandwiches, I'll see you in a month's time. And if you don't do any good, well, I don't like you. This is...
why do you need to make sandwiches that particular way? What experience have we got that this particular sandwich sells better than that sandwich? Is why we focus on it. I'll always remember an example. It was in the UK. I think it might be an airport. It may have been a railway station, but I'm pretty sure it was an airport. They noticed there was no tuna sandwiches being sold on certain days of the week, and other days they kind of fly for the roof. And I thought, what is it? What is it on a Wednesday, for example, they never sell? And then we discovered that lovely little Ethel, who works on a Wednesday making the sandwich, doesn't like tuna, so she doesn't make any tuna sandwiches. Right. She's made the decision that the business doesn't need to sell tuna, so it doesn't sell any. And it goes back to, well, okay, what process did we put in place to explain why we need to have a broad offer that included tuna sandwiches? And have we explored why she has concerns? What could we mitigate that? As opposed to, I wonder why we're not selling any tuna sandwiches. And it's that we often talk about this idea of good practice and best practice. And I think that they could be slightly different here. And good practice might be, this is a good idea. Have you thought about trying it? If you want to, it's optional. It's worked over this restaurant. Why don't you try it in yours? There's an optionality to it. Best practice, maybe you could call it non-negotiable, is this isn't up for debate. We're going to do it this way, but we want to explain the why bit first, the know why before the know how. And I think some multi-site managers, arguably some managers in general, are fearful of being quite clear. This is not up for debate. Let me tell you why. This is up for debate. This is optional. Let me tell you why that is. And you can make some judgments. Being clear what I expect you to do and why, as opposed to just what you could do if you like to do. To be clear.
I guess in business, there's a lot of Ethels that, do you know what I mean? They just feel like, I'm not feeling that today, and if I use McDonald's as an example, a lot of that would be non-negotiable. Like, you can't not cook burgers today because you just don't feel like it.
I had some, again, I mentioned Chris Muller, but he took us on a tour of some restaurants in Orlando some while, and we worked with a McDonald's franchise. And they had this great saying about freedom within the framework. So you were very clearly kind of laid out what you were allowed to do and not to do. And the things that you weren't allowed not to do, you had to do it in a certain way, or you just didn't do it at all. Other things, you had some freedom about what you could do. So have I got a blank piece of paper? I can do whatever I like. Or is there a prescribed process, or there's a prescribed thing I have to do, but I'm allowed to do it in any way. So as long as I end up in the right destination, the route doesn't matter. Whichever approach you want to take, and I do see, particularly some brands, don't want to turn into what they might see as a very corporate, very robotised, impersonal process. They want spontaneity. Fine. I have no issue with that. What you might want to do, though, is clearly define the endpoint.
Yeah.
And I think Disney are very good at that. They focus on outcomes, not so much input in terms of customer experience. They're very clear on what the customer experience should look like, but they give people a lot of latitude. You may have heard of their 4 keys that they have, which are the principles by which any cast member, as they call their team members, has to work within. And they've got a huge amount of discretion to close a ride down in Disney World because the first key is safety, and there can never be any compromise of that. So if someone drops a soft drink full of ice on the ride and people are one of those moving walkway rides, they close the ride because there could be a possibility that someone could slip. They have the empowerment to do that. So set out what your rules are, your principles, and give people freedom within that framework to make decisions, or go down the more corporate, then this step, then this step, then this step. Whichever way, we talk a lot about operational excellence. I think operational excellence will only ever be achieved if you are clear what good looks like. You've got to codify it. You've got to interpret it. Because if you don't, everyone else will interpret it differently.
Their way.
And if you're happy with that and you don't mind people interpreting it their way, fine. But most businesses I work with, and when you get under the skin of it, there's only a certain amount of interpretation that they, particularly when it comes to product quality, making sure it's consistent in terms of the texture, the service. They want a certain level of consistency. That's how global brands are built. It's about consistency, isn't it? You know what McDonald's in Beijing or Birmingham is going to be like, and a lot of businesses want to get that level of consistency, but they don't necessarily have to have quite as a corporate approach as a big business might have.
I guess many people's argument is, well, it's all right for McDonald's because they have 100% control over their supply chain, and they do, and that obviously makes it somewhat easier for them to then fold in all of those processes. But a friend of mine used to work for McDonald's, and he ran a couple of their sites, and now he's got a fish and chip business. But he said, everything I learned at McDonald's, I've implemented into my single unit. He goes, when my staff start a shift, I have a team meeting just before, 3 minutes. You're on this station, you're on that station, here's what I expect. I've got a runner. My staff aren't runners. He goes, I have a runner. He goes, I've got, kitchen porters. I don't want one of my staff leaving their station to go run and get something. We've got someone that does that. And he goes, so I explain to them constantly, here's what I expect from you. Here's your station. And then, are you not sure about anything on your station? You've had the training. No, I'm not sure about X. Okay, let's do it now. He goes, there's no excuse. And he goes, I've took what McDonald's taught me on a larger scale and I've brought it back to one, which in some ways could be easier.
I do, I've already mentioned Disney once, the theme parks. I cite them as an example of great operational excellence, great customer experiences. I'm talking about the theme parks, not the films.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
I had the privilege of getting to know a guy called Lee Cockrell, who was the vice president of operations for Walt Disney World, and I interviewed him for a podcast I did, and I asked him that question: how do they do it? How do they get so consistent? And he said, Lee, it's the C word. I went, well, hang on a moment, this is a family podcast, be careful what you say. And he went, it's clarity. It's absolute clarity from the get-go when you go for the interview, what's expected of you. I think you watch a 14-minute video before you even get interviewed, just to find out what it's really like to work in 80, 90 degree heat, etc. Wow. And then about 14% of people, I think it is, leave at that point. And they're like, that's great, you've self-selected. Yeah. Because we've given you clarity from the start of what's expected of you. And I think giving people clarity about where they can make decisions, where they can't, explaining why, I keep saying it, but I think it's really, really important, is key. But Professor Duncan Dixon, who I got to know also in Orlando at Rosen College, he used to say a little bit similar to your friend from McDonald's. He says, you can't just take what Disney does and just adopt it immediately, hot lock sale, but you can adapt it. And you can take the principles, and all of those principles, I would argue, can apply. And I think that's what your friend from McDonald's is saying. Yeah. I can take it and I can make it work for a single site, whether it's 1,000-strong chain or one.
You always hear it from people when they get stressed in a job and they're like, I didn't sign up for this, because they didn't know. Didn't have clarity. Yeah, they didn't have clarity. And you think, I'm just thinking of all the my primary customer base is the fish and chip industry, and I'm in a lot of groups that and I see all the time it's staff wanted, good rates of pay. Okay, that's a bit vague. Whereas if they're saying, here's what we expect of you. We expect you to have experience doing X, Y, Z. We're going to pay you Y. It's really good rate. But here's the non-desirables, let's say. If you're not happy with those, then this probably isn't the job for you.
Absolutely.
And at least then, you've weeded out all of the negatives or the people that just weren't that committed maybe for that role. Yeah. It strikes me as, how do people expect good staff retention if the role was vague, and then they find out the minute they walk in that, whoa, it's 42 degrees in here, no one told me that?
Or even worse, I like to look at something I call new hire turnover, which is kind of what percentage of your team start and leave within 90 days.
Okay.
So you've started them, they've left within 3 months. And I remember doing that in one business where, frankly, it was very high, like 60%. And what are we doing to these people? Why are they starting and leaving? And fundamentally, it was two reasons. Number one, recruitment. We were just recruiting anyone.
Oh,
it was like, you've got a heartbeat. You're which is,
some people date like that.
yeah, it's a whole other story. That's a different podcast. So I think poor recruitment. And again, have we trained our managers how to recruit? No, we haven't. Well, there's a shock, isn't it? They're just going, we're desperate for staff for a Saturday night. Peak period, we'll just take anyone. But the second part, which is even more damning, is then their first day or their induction is hell, and they're put on the register, or they're asked to serve guests immediately, or they're put in the kitchen and they've not yet understood the processes. And yeah, it's stressful. Who wants to work in that kind of environment when, as you rightly said, there's a buyer's market out there for the employees to choose where they work? So taking care of people. We refer to 4 operational disciplines, and that first one is what you've just spoken about, is clarity, about being clear what's expected of you, but equally what you can expect of me. So if I want to be a great, outstanding manager, what can you expect from me as your manager to support you so that you can be the best version of you, as they like to say, that there can possibly be?
Give me an example of what type of companies ring up Lee and say, Lee, we need you. What sort of problems could they be having? Well, what is it that they're calling MMU for?
So it's certainly a mixture of big and large. You might think it's only big companies, not at all. And in fact, arguably, big companies probably think they can resolve these issues themselves because they've got a training function. Medium and smaller companies probably are more open to, could you help us with this certain challenge? So what are they asking to help with? If it's around multi-unit management, which 9 times out of 10, that's where it starts, there's probably 2 big areas that I see. One is a total lack of, I'm going to say time management, but kind of planning, organisation, productivity. The area manager kind of gets up on a Monday morning and goes, where should I go this week? The schedule, their visit pattern is very ad hoc, and it's all, I'm going to go and see Stelios today, but just have a nice cup of coffee, rather than being, I need to see Stelios because we're working for an action plan to support his team to grow the business, and he needs to see me once every 2 weeks, whereas John over here, very experienced manager, been in the business 10 years, once every 6 weeks is sufficient. So it's planning, prioritisation, organisation as an element. I think when you're a single site manager, a lot of your day and your week is prescribed for you. Certain things happen at certain times every day or every week. As a multi-site manager, that isn't the case. And again, that's one of those transitional pieces you need to help people with. The second area is, I'd probably put it under the heading of, I hate the phrase performance management in some respects, but it is that ability, confidence and competence to tackle issues of performance, to tackle issues of poor performance rather than bury your head in the sand and hope it gets better. But equally, I think performance management is also the good stuff, developing performance to be even better than it is now. So to do it in a active, proactive way to develop the next generation of assistant managers. So if those are 2 common challenges, the very practical, the very obvious ways that demonstrate is we don't have an action plan. The area manager has no real action plan written down, or their stores don't. We need to improve our ability to do that. When we unpick that a little bit, the business review, the monthly business review, or reviewing how the business is performing, is either very inconsistently done, or if it is done, it's pretty much driven by the area manager, the regional manager, the multi-site manager. Whereas surely it's the GM's meeting. Really, it's not, the multi-site manager is facilitating it, but they need to own it as the store manager. There's no focus on different areas of the business. It tends to be, let's talk about your sales, let's talk about your cost of goods or your GP costs, let's talk about your labour. Now, of course, they're all 3 pretty important metrics in any hospitality, in any business to some degree. But what about the customer experience? What about what our competitors are up to? What about the quality audits that we may have, brand audits, we might be doing health and safety? What about the employee experience? What about, do we need to recruit people for the peak periods coming up? What about the current succession and development planning? All of those things I think are as important. So we talk about kind of a balanced operational review. The ability to help our managers do that better is something, it's probably 70% of the time where we start.
Yeah.
And probably, if I would say one other area, it's linked to what I just said, is the visit. So when I am visiting, what am I doing? Do I have that nice cup of tea in the chat with Stelios, or is there a kind of a structure to my visit? Am I being consistent across my area? Yeah. They're probably just all 3 big areas.
Do you think that in some ways this is all a bit of an American thing, or do you see how, as in, is it the fast food practices? Have they set everything that we're sort of doing? Is that the sort of stuff that you're teaching, or is it actually, no, these are management techniques that are going to help people get over the step? And it's not just American burger places. It's actually, I'm thinking of McDonald's essentially, but it's essentially the pizza shop we're in now, or the burger shop across the road, or the fish and chip chain that wants to grow to 10 sites because they've got 4 and they're struggling a little bit. Is that the sort of thing that we're doing here?
I definitely don't think it's been driven by a fast food even mindset. But I would say that some of those companies, Starbucks would be another one I talk about from a coffee perspective. They've certainly embraced some of those operational excellence practices. That the idea of what does a good business review look like? What does a good action plan look like? What does a good visit look like by the area manager? Again, I'm talking about from an area manager, multi-site perspective. And if you were to go, I think, to, say, Pizza Hut, or you went to McDonald's, or you went to Starbucks, I think the processes would be slightly different, I'm sure. But I bet there's a fundamental process for how we should review our business with our managers every month or every 6 weeks, whatever the period might be. I bet there's some kind of structure to how we should conduct good visits.
See, a lot of people listening to this might think, but it's all right for those companies because they've got loads of profit. But actually, this is going to take off the bottom line, although it will help you grow profit because it will sort of create consistency. But it does cost more to manage all of this, doesn't it? To have one person that's going around and saying, have you checked your profits today? Have you checked the profit and loss? Have you checked your waste and blah, blah, blah? If you're doing this, then someone is actually being paid to do that,
They are, and it's interesting, you just use that, checking profit and loss, checking wastage, checking labour. Part of a multi-site manager's job, it would be, shall we say, unrealistic not to expect to be part of that job, that audit element to the job. But I don't think the job is to be a cop. No. It is to be a coach predominantly. Yes. And you can be a cop and check things, but you do it in a coaching way. So you can ask questions about their labour. So, talk to me about your labour spend. Do you think it's in line? Yeah. What ideas have you got? If they go, everything's fine, you're 6% over, you might have a problem of alignment there. Yeah. But I think you can approach it from a coaching mindset, I suppose, is what I'm saying. But I think many of our clients, particularly small and medium businesses, recognise we haven't got the resources that a Starbucks or McDonald's have got. But again, I want to adopt the principles. So a business review in a restaurant chain, working with a wonderful group, I'm sure they won't say Murray Restaurants in Liverpool. They've got 3 restaurants due to open a 4th site, and they've been really, I think, proactive in so many ways. But from a management development perspective, this is good management. This is good development for our people, as well as our business is going to be better because we're managing our costs better. We'll be looking for opportunities to grow our revenue. We'll be developing people and keeping them. So there's some really good tangible benefits practically that we'll be able to see. But actually, it's also about developing our people to be better managers. And that's a transferable skill.
But as you say this, and I'm sold, by the way.
Oh, excellent.
I'll send you a check in a minute.
Yeah.
But it's not just multi-units, though, isn't it? Like, all the tools you're talking about could be inspiring a large team in a single unit, couldn't it?
Absolutely, and it's, again, not just in the sectors we've spoken about. The very first 2 clients I had, one was a coffee chain. Okay. The second one was a group of crematoriums. And literally, it was coffee to coffin, sorry. And it was...
you didn't get the granules mixed up, did you?
Yeah, no, definitely not. But it was one of those experiences that, for me, I'm so pleased it was literally our first 2 clients because it absolutely highlighted these principles can be applied to different sectors. And actually, again, if you've got one restaurant, I would, even though it's not a multi-site environment, clearly, the practices of reviewing my business, looking back and saying, what worked? How do we replicate that? How do I make sure we do it again? What didn't work? What do we do differently? How do we make sure that we either stop it happening or when it does happen, we've got different solutions? It doesn't matter if you've got one restaurant or 100 or 1,000. That's a good practice to have. Having a plan for the next quarter. One of our 3 or 4 operational disciplines is this idea of proactive planning. Most plans tend to be, we've got to fix a maintenance issue with the toilets, or we've got to ring John about supply chain problem, or we've got a problem with lighting, whatever it may be. So it's a issue we need to fix, and there needs to be what needs to be done, who's going to do it, always have an owner, and then there needs to be a time frame. Now that's typically what you see in most action plans. There's nothing wrong with that. What I think is lacking is the proactive part that says, what's our sales goal for next month? How are we going to achieve that? Are we just going to sit here, cross our fingers and our toes and hope that customers walk through the door? Or are we going to do something proactive? Or my earlier example, I want Stelios to be even more effective as an assistant general manager in 30 days than he is today. What am I going to do to make that happen other than just hope he gets better? You can do that if you've got one restaurant or 100, or you've got one retail store or one hotel, or whatever it may be. They're good management and leadership principles that apply regardless.
I guess you want to fix the toilet before it breaks. Or,
Yeah,
you
that's about prioritisation,
yeah.
yes.
So make sure that, the plumber is coming to check it once a year, twice a year, to make sure that everything's working, rather than waiting for it to break.
Yeah, and having a good maintenance routine. Why do companies do that? Because they don't want the equipment to break down. Whether it's a small piece of equipment that, if it breaks down, can reduce your revenue. It's not as expensive itself to replace, but the impact of not having that bit of equipment to serve your customers is dramatic. Or a really expensive piece of kit that could take ages to get repaired. Yeah. Either way, preventative maintenance is surely a better solution.
Yeah, you'd think so. I know I was chatting to someone the other day, and they were saying that they went into, again, it's not a McDonald's podcast, but they went into a McDonald's and they said there was a breakdown on one of the machines, and they were waiting in the drive-through queue for an hour. And I was thinking, I know the customer was obviously annoyed about that, but imagine how annoyed the likes of McDonald's would have been. Like, because they don't like stuff like that, And for them, that lack of, that damage or whatever it was that happened, or that breakdown, affects their business.
Yep.
Affects their reputation, affects their throughput. So prevention is surely better than, and it can happen to the best of the companies, I guess.
Yeah, and I'd also take that to a people level and say, actually, if I'm training my staff, wouldn't it be a good idea if I could sort of multi-skill them, so that when John leaves, or he's off on holiday, or he's sick, or whatever it might be, I've got Sarah who can step into his shoes because she's been trained to do the job. Not, oh my God, I forgot John's on holiday, chaos, hair's on fire, what do I do? Oh, now I need to train Sarah up. So you can do a lot of that proactivity.
Yeah, it's almost saying to John beforehand, John, make sure you've got 6 months, you're going away, can you start training Sarah to do bits and bobs of your job, please?
Yeah. And something you talked about earlier, not promoting someone unless they've got someone as a successor being developed, and they understanding that part of my job, my responsibility, if I want to get promoted, I need to be developing my own successor.
I never would have thought of it like that.
I mean, I think it should almost be mandatory in a sense, not quite simple as that, I know, but there should be a accountability, responsibility for an individual who says, I want to get promoted, but I need to be thinking about who replaces me, rather than, not my problem, someone else can fix it.
Almost promotes that. It almost promotes naturally the team roles as well. That we're being a team, because I'm bringing up 3 people behind me, and they're bringing up 2 people behind them.
Yeah, which is that rule of 7 thing.
Exactly.
And again, I think good, outstanding multi-site managers think about that rule of 7. They're not individually, personally going to be training everyone on that rule of 7, but they do know that, well, I know Stelios is training Sarah. So when I go and see Stelios and Sarah's on, I can say, Sarah, I understand this week Stelios was going to be talking to you about P&Ls, wasn't he? I don't need to do the training about P&Ls, but I show an interest. Yeah. And Sarah's like, oh, my boss's boss knows that I'm being trained. And that's what I think good, outstanding multi-site managers do. But good, outstanding managers should do it in one location. You don't have to be a multi-site manager to do things like that, to think about succession at several layers beneath you.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? But I guess one of the difficulties with having a single unit, I guess, Lee, is that there probably isn't the hierarchy to move upwards. So how would you deal with that differently? So, a single location, even if there's 30 staff, 40 staff, how can you say, how would you deal with that differently? Because you can't inspire them to take over the owner, let's say.
Yeah, that can be a challenge, and in a glib way. Do you remember that phrase? What happens if you develop people and they leave?
Yeah.
And what happens if you don't develop them and they stay?
Yeah.
Now, the reality is, you say, there is lots of opportunity out there at the moment for people to find other jobs. So if they're not going to get the opportunity to get that promotion that they need, they will go elsewhere. That doesn't mean that's necessarily a bad thing overall, but what you might better do is slow it down, the need for them to leave, because you are showing an interest, developing them, some of the other benefits, the cultural piece, things you do to take care of them as a team, etc. Development is just one of those benefits, I think. Can help people to say, well, yeah, the grass might be greener over in X brand, but I wouldn't get A, B, and C benefits. I wouldn't have someone taking care of me. I forget the exact stat, but we so many people join brands, but they leave managers. All our listeners would have heard that before. But I think it's really, really true. And if your manager shows an interest in developing you, it doesn't mean oh, I'm guaranteeing you, Stelos, you've got a job in 6 weeks to get promoted, because that's not what it's about. But it's saying, I want to get you ready, get you more capable. Maybe you're able to take on more responsibility. Maybe you're able to make your job more interesting, more diverse, because you've been upskilled in other areas. Maybe you can cover, if it was another site, maybe another site, or take on a little project for me just to make your job more interesting. Because what I can't guarantee you is, in terms of the pipeline, there's not a lot of movement, people leaving because there's not that many, it's one place. I can't guarantee you another job, but I can guarantee you I'm always going to try and stretch you, develop you, give you new things to learn. Because let's face it, there's always new things to learn.
Yeah.
Of course, that person might go, that's great, but I need to earn more money, so I need to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Fine. Even if they do, they will look back on you and say, you challenged me, you stretched me, you developed me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's right. You just got to accept the fact that this is what it is. You know, we haven't got somewhere else for you to go, and so I might as well train you as much as you want to stay here, and teach you as I'm being learnt as well, because everyone learns at different levels, and bosses still learn, don't they? I know owners that learn every day.
Anyone who thinks they haven't got still something to, school is never out for the pro. Like a Jim Sullivan quote machine today, but he, I think he's spot on. You should always want to get better, and your access to new information, from podcasts to videos to your YouTube to some of the materials that's out there, so much of it for free. It's just your time. You can always improve. The only thing I'd take issue in one respect is that not everyone does want to get promoted. Some people say, I'm loving my job, don't want the extra responsibility of being a manager. When you get those keys, you're now responsible. You get the phone call in the middle of the night kind of thing. I don't want that. And there will always be those, a steady Eddie, I suppose, is a phrase people would use, but they're really good at their job and they just enjoy what they're doing, or they want to get promoted, but not right now. Time in their life, season of life isn't quite right for them at the time. Maybe they've just moved or whatever it may be. It's just not right for them at the moment. What you don't want is a whole organisation full of them, because there's never any succession. But equally, if everyone wants to get promoted, you've got a problem, because you're not going to be able to fill it.
I think one thing that I've always thought is a myth that needs dispelling is that you treat everyone the same. For me, that you can't treat every person the same. You know, because like you said, everyone's got different needs and wants. Someone wants to go up in the world and be management and so on, and others, just like you said, just want to be steady Eddie. And that's not a derogatory term. It's just someone who is very reliable, who will give you 100% of his time for that role. And I think, again, that's probably a bit frowned upon, that word steady Eddie, but it shouldn't be, because that's a very reliable person who is giving you 100% of their time and doing that job perfectly. And I
think many operators love those people,
you know, of course,
because they can rely on them.
You know, my operations person, who is also my wife, is that type of person. You know, she's very dedicated, doing exactly that. But if I said to her right now, would you like to do this role? No, I'm quite doing that one at the moment. I'm really good at doing that one. I'd like to stick to it. And maybe in a few years that may change. But at the moment, that is what it is. And I think you can't push people out of their comfort zone unless they want to. I think, you know, it's like you said earlier about compliance. You know, you have to want to be pushed as well. Because some people are just like, I don't want to do this. I'm happy doing what I'm doing, thanks.
I just hope your wife has heard that comment.
She doesn't listen to any of this.
Oh, okay. Just giving her feedback on what she wants. I suppose I've forgotten the point I was going to make. I was too busy trying to be clever. The reality is that not everyone wants to progress, but it doesn't mean they don't want to learn.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they don't want to take on more. So development shouldn't mean automatically career progression right now. It could just mean you're getting more skillful, you're getting more knowledgeable, and it's about hopefully a desire to want to do that. Again, you can't develop someone who doesn't want to be developed. So if they don't want it, and I'm not talking about they're not doing the job right, that's a different performance issue, but people who are doing the job as they need to, and you want to stretch them, give them the opportunities, if they don't want that, forcing it on them, I'm not sure it's often very rarely successful, shall we say. It's probably not the best thing.
It has to be a joint participation, doesn't it? You know, that person needs to be willing. And I like the way that you said that just because that person doesn't want to move upwards doesn't mean they doesn't want to learn in that role that he's in. So again, training and courses make a big, you know.
And it might just be it makes their job more varied, and that they can take on additional tasks, get involved in a project. In larger companies, kind of cross-functional projects is a real opportunity.
Well,
smaller companies,
I was going to say that's
so easy to do.
Yeah, and also it might pique their interest if you show them something on the verge of their talent.
Very good point.
You know, it might. Well, actually, I quite like a bit of that. You know. And it might be that takes their interest to then say, well, actually, I wouldn't mind doing this other job. You don't know.
Yeah, we teach a model we use. We call it people inventory, and the whole idea is you're doing a stock take on people's skill sets.
Wow.
We talk about their technical skills, their behavioural skills. So I hate the phrase soft skills because these things are very rarely soft or easy. And then there's the knowledge. So technical, behavioural skills, and knowledge. And in a sense, what are you strong at? So I'm really good technically at chef skills, knife skills, for sake of argument. Knowledge, I've got good knowledge on HR policies. From a behavioural point of view, I'm really good at motivating my team, getting them focused on delivering their targets. So that's great, their strengths. And too often people go straight to weaknesses. And I'm not a great fan of that word. If I can, try and use limitations, i.e. what could be holding you back? A skill set that maybe you need to develop, or piece of knowledge you need to acquire, because it's holding you back. I'll give you an example of one that I think is big in a second. But if I go to technical skills, it could be something around, well, if I'm a barista, I'm not very good at latte art. So I can make a coffee, but I can't do art. That's a technical skill I could learn. Or actually, I'm quite good at leading the team, motivating them. But when it comes to having a conversation about poor performance, I shy away from it. So I've got to be more comfortable having those tough conversations. Or knowledge, well, I said I knew the HR policies, but actually I don't understand about P&L. I can look at it and I can pick out a couple of lines, but I can't really understand it and know what I can do about it. They're all things that could hold you back from getting promoted. I said there was one thing that really stood out for me. And again, it was Chris Muller who said this to me years ago. Quite controversial maybe. Most operators lie about their level of understanding of finance because they don't want to look stupid. And when he said that to me, I was like, yeah, put my hand up, that's me, I've done that. I pretended I understood what EBITDA meant, or EBITDA even, or I've understood time value of money, or whatever it may be, shareholder return, because I didn't want to pretend or show that I didn't really understand it. And I think particularly anyone in operations who wants to progress, operations director, more senior roles, a love, or maybe not a love is the wrong word, an understanding, an appreciation of finance is really important. And again, YouTube, so many books. The One Thing Your CEO Wants You to Know by Ram Charan, really good book, and it's nice and thin, so it's big font, and it takes you from the basics of what's profit, what's gross profit, to what is EBITDA, what is time value of money. So if you want to learn about finance, that's a good one. But there's so many other things out there. Take ownership. So when you do a people inventory, it's about what are the strengths, because we can build upon them. Or Stelios, if you've got a strength in one area, maybe there's someone else has got a limitation in the same area, you might be able to help them. So I might be able to buddy you up, because again, I as the manager don't have to teach everybody everything. And then what are the limitations? And that is, maybe it's the recipe, it's the ingredients rather, I should say, for a potential development goal. Because you might want to focus on building up a strength. People tend to like building on strengths. So the people inventory gives you as a manager the ability to focus on the strengths of your team. But by the way, it's a two-way point. It shouldn't just be you sitting there going, what do I think Lee's good at? What do I think he's not good at? It should be a conversation which you both feed into. But those are the ingredients for a potential development goal. So I might want to focus on a strength because, to be honest, most people like focusing on strengths. They're good at it. Therefore, they don't mind working on it more. Or I might have someone who has got a strength in a particular area, maybe knowledge of the P&L, knowledge of stock taking, or the software we use. Someone else doesn't have that knowledge, I can buddy them up. So I don't, as the manager, have to do everything. And it then, people inventory is probably something you do once, maybe twice a year, because it doesn't radically change in 3 or 4 months. But it's something you can go back and go to, which areas of this do we want to focus and create probably no more than 2, maybe 1 development goal for you, but they're going to go back to what are we going to do in the next 30 days, the next 60 days, the next 90 days. I'm a great fan of 3 months quarters. Businesses tend to work in quarters or talk in the language of quarters. 90 days isn't tomorrow, but equally it's not so far away. Oh, I've got months to do this. I'll put it off. Mañana. We all know procrastination is the enemy of productivity.
It's interesting because you're not saying that someone can't ever do it. It's just that they need to be trained to do it. And I think one of the revelations that sort of came to me in a previous podcast was with a business coach. And I was talking about, the personality traits of people. And she says, the only reason I'm not a fan of Myers-Briggs is the fact that people stick to it afterwards. They'll say, well, I'm a EFTJ or whatever. And then they stick to it. And they say, well, I can't do that because I'm X. You know. And she says, well, actually, no, everyone can break out of those with training or whatever. You know, if you're an introvert, you can do things to train yourself to be an extrovert. You know, there's so many, so people cling on to these labels sometimes.
It's funny because I am a fan of MBTI, but you're quite right. It is not. You're not put in a box and you're stuck in that room.
Yeah.
The way I was kind of explaining it is each MBTI label is it's a different room in your house, and we all go to different rooms in our houses. There are some rooms we spend more time in. So occasionally we go up to the loft, but not often. But we can visit anywhere. We are capable in MBTI doing all of them. We just have some that we prefer to do more or are harder to do.
Yeah, and some that just feel naturally easy.
Exactly. It's about natural preference. So my preferences, I know, people are often surprised when I say that I have a preference for introversion over extroversion, and people are, you seem to be quite outgoing and chatty. I'm like, it doesn't mean I can't be outgoing and chatty, but you know what? At the end of the day, I'm exhausted. If I've done a course, let's say I'm delivering a one-day program, or let me give you a better example, I'm delivering a two-day program, there's like a night in between. What I don't want to do is go out for dinner with everyone the night in between. Please, I hope I'm not offending any clients by saying that, but it's because I'm knackered by the end of it, because I've been really working my e-preference all day long, and now I need a bit of quiet. It's more tiring than for someone who's got an e-preference. It's very natural to them. So it's not about can't do and
it's not because you want to be ignorant or you want to be quiet or you want to be rude or you naturally want to go back into your shell. It's actually because it was tiring to put on that performance to some degree. It is a performance. I don't mean performance as in that you were lying, but it is you are out of your natural comfort zone.
It requires an intentionality to it. I need to be focused at what I'm doing. I would describe myself as quite a detailed person, so I'm an S preference and MBTI, turning to an MBTI podcast, but I can do big picture, but I don't find it easy, and I work far better if I'm bouncing off people with this one than if I try to do it on my own. Even though me sitting in a room as an I preference working on a piece of work I'm normally quite comfortable doing, if it's something for involving blue sky thinking, I need kind of the inspiration. I need other people to help me to do that, to do my best work.
So in some ways, it's people like me who haven't fully understood Myers-Briggs personality test and actually just applied it to everything.
All your fault,
it's all my fault.
So your wife just sent me a message to say that. Actually,
globally. But and I think
all of those tools are like that.
So
DISC, Insights, they're all. I have no criticism. I think
it's just the way they're applied.
Exactly. Interesting enough, Myers-Briggs should never be used for recruitment. Never. Because it's about preference, not ability. And my jokey way of saying that, if I had a preference for karaoke, which, I can't have a few drinks, I'll do some karaoke, I don't have any ability. So I sound like a cat being strangled, but I quite enjoy trying it. If you were recruiting for a singer, you might look at it and go, oh, he'd be a great singer, he has a preference for it. Not necessarily.
I think a friend of mine was using DISC.
That's another
employment. For employment.
And some you
Recruitment,
can. So there are trait tools and type tools. Sorry, we're getting very into tools here, but there are different types of tools, and there are some that absolutely are fine to use for recruitment purposes. I would just say ethically that Myers-Briggs should not be used for recruitment, for development of people, for understanding. I like to call it, you get a bit of tech and you get a quick reference guide. That's what, Stelios comes to work for me and I do his MBTI, and I've now got a quick reference guide to know how to better to communicate, how best to maximise his contribution to lead him. It gives me a sense. It's not an exact set-up guide, because you're human, we're all quirky, we're all different, but it does gives us something to help us.
You just need observational skills when dealing with people to figure out what actually makes them tick sometimes. And these things work, don't get me wrong, but I think if you've got your ears open, your eyes open for the most part, you can figure out what floats people's boat. And I think, I've always said sometimes enthusiasm over ability. Because you can grow ability if they've got enthusiasm, can't they?
That's the what's that? Recruit for character, train for competence element. Absolutely. And you said earlier about someone might see it as a challenging thing about equality and saying actually don't treat everyone equally in some respects. And you reminded me, Ken Blanchard said there's nothing so unequal as the equal treatment of unequals. What he's saying is we're all different. So. Yes, equality from a legal perspective.
Exactly. That covers that, though, doesn't it?
But we are different, and we have different desires. Some people want to get promoted, some people don't. Some people are motivated by intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So we are all different, and one size fits all does not work for developing people.
I guess it'd be good if employers just said to people, "What are your expectations here? Like, what is it you want?" And again,
back to that first discipline, clarity around expectations, what you should expect from me as a manager, but I want to understand from your perspective what you need from me as your manager.
That makes complete sense. But I think this is what people just don't get. You've simplified some of these processes, and they're easy. Well, don't get me wrong, they need work. obviously to implement, and then you
I'm a great
traceability.
believer in simplicity.
Yeah.
So I used to joke that if, as an operator, which I was for some time, if it's more than 2 pages, I ain't going to use it. So if it's a complex tool, if it's got to read loads and loads of things, certainly on a regular basis, I'm not going to do it. So let's make it simple in terms of execution. I don't mean the concept has to be really simple when it's said that they won't get it. I don't mean that. But if it's cumbersome, and one example, performance appraisal forms. The worst one I think I've ever seen was 15 pages long. And guess what? No one in their business ever wanted to do appraisals because it took so flipping long to do.
See, that feels like to me that they're just trying to trip up staff or trip up people, like, leave room for interpretation, whereas, I don't know, I just feel like that shouldn't be that long. It's just...
It absolutely, and the problem my personal view is that it's about the conversation, not the form, the filling. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any form, but if it gets in the way, it's in business. You want to make it as frictionless as possible for your customer, your client to work with you. If you think about it in the terms of manager and employee, I don't quite mean in that kind of management client perspective, but I'm here to serve you. I want to make it as easy as possible to do the best I can for you. Putting a 15-page form in the way, or God forbid an online 15-page form, and everyone just sits there crowded around the laptop without actually the quality of the conversation. What are you doing really well, Stella? I'm really pleased and proud of you, and I want to tell you great job. Because performance appraisal, the word praise is in there, it's there. We want to do that. But equally, maybe there's some things you could be looking at a different way.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some things that actually from a KPI perspective, some of your peers are doing better than you. What could you do differently? What do you see them doing that you might not be doing that could impact and improve your results? That kind of conversation even. And then agreeing a couple of objectives to drive business performance, one or two personal development objectives. That's what the appraisal conversation should kind of be about. And we've all heard that rule, no surprises. You shouldn't be saying, oh, Stelios, 7 months ago you were late 3 times, and now I'm bringing it up. No. It should be something, I'm an evangelist when it comes to one-to-ones. I think they are so important. The annual appraisal is a waste of time if it's an annual, once-a-year process. There's nothing wrong with an appraisal as a summation of what's good, etc., setting new goals, but then the one-to-one keeps that regular cycle going in. So we talk about that idea that you're checking in with people, not checking up on people.
Yes.
It's not micromanagement.
I guess in small business terms, the leader or the manager or owner, if it's a very small business, should be trying to have a one-to-one with a member of staff, even if they don't personally may not like them, but it's not someone you go to the pub with, is what I mean.
Absolutely,
You'd want to be having a one-to-one at least once a month with them, like just doing a shift together or crossing paths or doing something that makes you have that conversation, because like you say, you can't just rock up every 6 months and be like, what have you done wrong? What was the point? They're just going to feel despondent, aren't they?
Yeah, and if it's okay, one thing I'd love to make available to your listeners, we have a free guide to better one-to-ones. It's called that, Better One-to-Ones. And there's 2 of them. There's better one-to-ones and better questions, because, again, I think I said it earlier, our job is to ask better questions as managers. And it doesn't matter if you're a single site manager, one business, one site, or a multi-unit manager. Rather than ask and do that. We'll be more comfortable in doing that. And these guides give you a bit of a structure to it. And I think some really good questions. What do you need more support from me on? What do you need less support from me on? And just that one question could be quite interesting to get the perspective of more support or less support. And you get a real sense of, oh, hang on a moment, maybe I am micromanaging this person, because they're kind of saying, back off, I can do it. Or actually, I don't know what I'm doing, help. And I've gone, you'll be great. Well, that's nice of you to say that, but actually I'm struggling. I need that one-to-one.
What do you do about the person that says, back off, mate, I've got this, I know what I'm doing, and then get it wrong?
Well, firstly, I would record the fact they said it, as I've got... No. I think you will get individuals like that. I think, firstly, go back to that clarity. Are we absolutely clear what the expectations are, what good looks like? What is there a sales number? Is there a percentage? Is there any kind of quantification? So we're absolutely clear what good looks like. If that person hasn't achieved the goal, do we have to wait 3 months to find that out? I would assume, particularly a lot of sales or customer service related goals, the metrics can be quite quickly pulled up from an app or any kind of platform or system you might be using, your cash register for sales and things like that. So you can spot quite quickly, we're 4 days into a 7-day week target and you're nowhere near hitting it. We don't wait till day 8 to discuss why didn't you hit it. So I think nipping things in the bud or raising the point early intervention is what I'm saying, depending what the issue is important to help them realise, actually, I thought I had this, you said you had it, but I'm nowhere near where I needed to be. Why do you think that is?
Yeah.
And at that point, I would say most people will go, actually, okay, maybe I didn't have this as much as I thought I did. I could do with some help here. If they still go, no, I've got 3 days left, I'm going to hit it, I might, depending on the issue, give them those 3 days, and then at the end of the 7 days they have not hit it, then we need to say, whoa, hang on a moment. You were given the space that you requested, we reviewed it after 4 days. You weren't where you needed to be, but you were still convinced you would get there. You didn't get there. We now know that's a fact. Let's explore why you didn't get there. What did and didn't you do? If you've got other colleagues or other locations, if it is a multi-site business and you can show that other people did achieve it, what's the difference between how they approached it? Was there external factors or internal factors? But get them to do the analysis.
Yeah.
If they are, I'm not saying unwilling, because that can be the case. Sometimes they're just blind and they don't see it. Then your job is to make that clear. So again, part of the coaching job is sometimes to provide direction.
Just made me think, because one of my customers stroke friends texted me the other day and he said, I've got this member of staff, I've showed her how to do something, she knows exactly, well, when in training she does it right, but then in practice, when we're in a shift, I get customers calling me that the product wasn't in their bag, and I said, well, have you got a checklist? Got a checklist. I said, have you got anything else what you can do? He goes, well, there's nothing else I can do. I was like, he goes, I brought her in for more training, gets it right every time. But then in the shift, she gets it wrong. And I just said, well, maybe it's a case of if retraining's not working, you put her into a different role, And he was like, oh, there must be another way. And I was like, well, I don't know what it is. In that scenario, what would you do? Again, I think he's tried early intervention, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so one of the most useful models I learned as a manager years ago, and I teach today because I do genuinely think it's really helpful, PCOM, P-C-O-M. So I've got a performance issue, and I apply PCOM to it. So P, purpose. What is the purpose of this task? Why does it need to be done? What's the benefits on the customer or the client or whatever? Why does it matter? Does the person, let's call them John again, I keep using John today. Does John know? Yeah, poor John, we'll sack him later. Does John know the purpose? Could he articulate why does this matter, who it impacts, etc.? The C is capability. This is the training bit. Have they got the skill, the knowledge, have they had the training, etc. required to do it? The O stands for opportunity. So have they had the opportunity to practice? I'd also say, have they had the opportunity for feedback? So if I'm John's manager and I see him not doing it right, am I actually giving him that feedback? Or do we wait until we get a customer complaint and then I give him the feedback? The M is motivation. Now, I'm going to come back to that M in 1 second. For me, if I was a manager, if I'm honest, I used to go immediately to the C and the M. Can't do, won't do. And what PCOM taught me is, did they actually know the purpose? Have I ever explained it to them? Or have I assumed another manager has done that? Have I assumed someone else has done the training course, for example? If I've assumed, let's do, I think some people call it the AA, the assumption audit. Let's remove the words, he should have known that, or she should have been able to do it. Let's remove that ambiguity, clarity again. Let's go back and re-explain it. This time, I might write it down in a note that we've discussed it, we've explored the reasons why it matters, the impact on the business if we don't do X or Y, impact on clients, etc., and it's recorded. Next time, there won't be kind of really any question that they don't know the purpose. Unless there's some kind of memory issue, they're not going to not remember the purpose. The opportunity is the other one where, for hands on heart, I didn't necessarily always make sure was there. Had I given them that feedback? Some people put resources under opportunity. Have they got the resources? Time being an example of resource. It doesn't really matter if you go, well, that's more, surely isn't that capability, or is it more opportunity? It doesn't really matter. But what you're saying is, have they had the opportunity to practice, get it right, get feedback when they haven't from me as their manager and other colleagues? If I answer all of those, purpose, capability, opportunity, I feel hand on heart they're all in place, then we come to motivation. They don't want to do it. At that point, I have to decide, is that acceptable? And I would imagine most of the time it isn't. And I will share a very quick story. I think it's very unfair at the time, but I got a nickname as Darth Vader. And I remember sacking this guy for not wearing his name badge. I'm like, how could you sack someone, Lee, for not wearing a name badge? How evil of you. And I'm like, well, let's just take a step back. He'd had a written warning. Sorry, a verbal warning first, then a written warning, then a second written warning, and then there I was doing effectively the fourth disciplinary hearing with this guy. And I'd kind of been adopted this person as I took over this location. And I sat there and said, look, do you understand why the company requires you to wear a name badge? Have we provided you with name badges? I think this guy had a name badge within 8 feet of him anywhere in the building. Must be about 50 of his name badges. Do you have you been told before to wear a name badge? No, it was all pretty basic stuff. It came down to he didn't really want to wear a name badge. He didn't like people knowing his name. That's fine. Let us find another employer that will very happily let you work for them and not wear a name badge. Because if you're going to work for me, you're going to wear your name badge. So in that case, I transferred him to the competition because I was not prepared to let someone not wear a name badge. A real basic, simple standard. Now, sometimes things are much more complicated and you give people much longer. For something as simple as not wearing a name badge or not correctly packaging up a food item or upselling, which is a big one, not suggestively selling things to guests, I'd want to explore why the team member is not doing that. For me, achieving the sale isn't what matters. For me, it's about trying. So I actually hate the phrase upselling. I prefer uptelling. So I think you should be passionately talking, I've got a great new item I want to share with you. I want you to taste it. I want to tell you about it. Or a new promotion that will save you some money or whatever it may be. And I should genuinely be excited about you having the best experience as my customer or my guest as you possibly can. I should want to tell you about it. If I've got a member of staff who's not doing that, and I go through purpose, I go through capability, I go through opportunity, and it comes back to motivation, they feel they're being pushy, that's often what I hear about suggestive selling, then we have to at some point have the conversation that says, can I accept that person consciously, willingly not following the guidance? And my view is no. The number one reason most people don't perform is because they're allowed not to. And I walk past poor performance, I bury my head in the sand, and I hope it gets better.
See, it's one of those things with upselling, cross-selling, whatever you want to call it, because they are slightly different. But I think one of the disappointing things is that people think that it's just for extra sales, that it's only for extra sales. And don't get me wrong, from a business point of view, if you can sell a portion of something, like a biscuit with that coffee, that makes complete sense. I get it. It's extra margin. But that keeps you in work. If it means that there's a bonus attached to it because you sold lots of those, well, ain't that a motivator? But I think from a fish and chip industry point of view, it's a very holistic, natural sort of industry, and people really hate upselling or cross-selling because they see it as a McDonald's thing, an Americanization. Whereas actually, one of the biggest pet peeves of customers is actually, I had no peas with my fish and chips. I had no curry with my fish and chips. And if somebody said, did you want peas with that? That's just suggestion.
Yeah. Do you want salt and vinegar?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I guess that is a nice suggestion that actually, you know what, I do fancy some curry sauce with that. I'll have some of that. Or I'll have a tartar sauce, that homemade tartar sauce. Well, you've made it. You might as well sell it.
Yeah, but the driving force for me is I want you to have the best experience you can.
Yeah.
And if you go home and go, I haven't got my mushy peas.
It's annoying.
Yeah. I'm at gravy. Or, why didn't no one tell me it? The bugbear for me used to be buying a present for someone and it needed batteries. I'm like, flip's sake, tell me if it needs batteries.
I know the word I'd use, but
yes. I'm trying to be polite. But that for me is not about the fact, I'd probably get some margin for my business if I sell those batteries or I sell that curry sauce. The
experience would have been better.
But the customer is going, okay, they remembered, they thought of me. They went further than I expected. And for me, managing customer dissatisfaction, just eliminating dissatisfaction is a big success in itself. But uptelling, as I like to call it, is just the mentality shouldn't be, it's because I need to hit a sales target of £400 today. I'm not saying don't know that, and I'm absolutely saying the manager should, but my driving force is I want you to have the best experience. That's why we do it, not because I want to hit a sales target. That's a benefit. It's profit is the applause you get from doing a great job. I forget who said that, but that for me is what it's about. We get great sales because we've done a great job. Yeah,
no, it's true. Well, before we wrap this up, what's really important to you? What's happening over the next few months for you? What are you really excited about?
Well, obviously, I don't want to date the podcast, but in terms of obviously we're coming out of the pandemic. Hopefully, it is so wonderful to see the return of people to hospitality in all its forms. Hospitality restaurants have had a really tough time, but if I was running a nightclub, God, the people, theatres, very, very difficult for them to operate. So it's just great that that's beginning to happen. So quite frankly, we're moving from hopefully of a survival phase and we're moving into growth again. We're moving forward again. So that's really exciting. the opportunity to get involved with the next generation of multi-site managers always excites me. So we've got a couple of projects on the cards at the moment with companies where it's about helping people who are just about to be promoted, or in one case, helping them build the next generation who might not get promoted for a year, but it's back to your point about we need to keep these people. We can't necessarily pay them loads more than competition, but what we can do is give them the best development experience they can, and part of that will be about developing their leadership skills, developing good multi-unit management skills. It's just good management skills. As we said earlier, it cuts across. So I'm really excited about doing that. And I mentioned we've got a partnership with Franklin Covey, which some people will know, 7 Habits, one of the most widely bought leadership books in the world. Ken Blanchard, I've mentioned him today, the 1 Minute Manager, situational leadership. We're now channel partners with Blanchard, and we work partnering closely with Covey, so we can deliver their programs like the 7 Habits, etc. And to be honest, I think sometimes certainly smaller companies will think, a bit like you said earlier, I don't have the resource to bring Franklin Covey content. It's too big, it's too much, I can't afford that. Well, actually, I think you might be surprised with us acting as a channel partner, we can offer those kind of programs. And I hope, one of the nicest, I think it was a compliment, that someone said to me was, you can take the boy out of operations, but you can't take the operator out of the boy. So I hope what I and my colleagues can do is bring it back to what does it mean to run a really good retail, restaurant, hospitality business, because that's kind of our meat and potato. Yes, we work in other sectors, but our heart and soul will always be in great customer experiences. Because everyone deserves to have a great manager.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And again, no one can be blind going forward. They've got all these resources at their fingertips, haven't they?
There's more, in a sense, that's almost the problem. There's so much choice today, and sometimes you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And often people know the problem, they see the burning platform, but they don't know where to leap to. And in multi-unit management, anyone wants to contact us to help. I just love having conversations with people.
I'll link to all your website in the intros anyway, and especially the free guides. Thanks for that. And Lee, thank you for your time today, mate.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Stelios.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to Pizza Pilgrims for having us as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is, for me, an example of a brand that just goes from strength to strength. I never would have thought, pizza in a box at home, something these guys launched last year in the pandemic. They sent it to me. I made a bit of a mess of it myself. I dropped one on the floor. The dog enjoyed it. But they are just so innovative. I think the pizzas are fantastic. You might say I would say that, but I genuinely do think that. But they're always looking for new ways of bringing great quality pizzas to people. And I'm very grateful for them for letting us have. We're in the Victoria branch today in London in the basement. You may have heard a few squeaks as the guys go out their operational
business. It's a real life.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
No sterile room for us. We want to be there in front, because that's where the business is. It's the front line, isn't it, that delivers. So it's nice to be there. Thank you for staying.
Thanks for having me, Lee. Massive thank you to Lee for joining me today. It was a great conversation, talking about MMU, mastering multi-units, because it's a completely different mindset. Really good to talk about that. If you want to follow Lee, we're going to add his links to the show note and just click on that in your podcast player. I know you're all really busy, but take a second to click and share on any of our social media feeds, and also send this episode to anyone in the industry, because if you like it, chances are they will too. Any feedback, email me on stelios@worldofceres.com.